Story number 1. When Lily Cries at Night. Before my daughter Lily turned 1, she got her ears pierced. My wife bought a pair of earrings for our daughter to prevent the piercings from closing. Lily still cries at night sometimes. On my day off, I would get up in the middle of the night when Lily cried. I would go into her room and rock her back to sleep. Sometimes my back would hurt when I held her and rocked her back to sleep. I also didn't want to use the rocking chair because I didn't want to get too comfortable and fall asleep. I didn't want Lily to roll off my arms and fall down. Instead of holding and rocking Lily back to sleep, I would grab her pillow and put it down on the carpet. I'd lay my head down on the pillow and lie flat on my back. I'd put Lily on top of my chest, and she would just fall asleep like that. Sometimes she would roll down onto my side without waking up. From then on, when she cried at night, I would go into her room and put her on my chest, falling asleep on the carpet, in her room. One night at 1 a.m., Lily woke up and started crying. I went into her room and got her out of her crib. I lay down on the carpet with her on my chest, and we both fell asleep. Around 3 a.m., I kind of woke up. I wasn't fully awake. I wasn't able to open my eyes for some reason, but my mind was awake. I slept with my right arm stretched out and my left arm wrapped around my daughter. In that state, I couldn't speak, open my eyes, or move my body. The only parts of my body that I could move were my hands. My left arm still wrapped around my daughter. She was still sleeping soundly on top of my chest. However, my right hand was touching a little face. Someone else was sleeping on the right side of us, and my hand was touching its face. I was thinking to myself that if my daughter is still on top of my chest, then who is sleeping on my right? My right hand kept touching that little face until I touched one of the ears and felt the earring. The earrings made me realize that the one sleeping on the right side of me was my daughter. She might have rolled off onto the right side of me. But if the one on my right is my daughter, then who is on top of my chest? I tried to feel the thing on top of me with my left hand, and I realized that its hair was a lot longer than my daughter's hair. That's when I knew that I was experiencing sleep paralysis. All of a sudden, my daughter started crying, and I felt the weight on my chest lift. That's when I woke up. I was able to open my eyes and move my body. I grabbed my phone and turned it on to look around. There was only my daughter and me in her room. Sleep paralysis can feel so real, even though it's not. Story number 2. The Mong traditional funeral clothes. I heard that my aunt is really sick at the hospital, and they're going to remove the breathing tube from her mouth. When my mother heard this news, she wanted me to take her to the hospital before my aunt passed away. When we arrived, most of the relatives were already there. Everyone was crying, and some people were sitting outside in the hallway while others were in the room. Upon entering the room, my mother and I saw my aunt sleeping in the hospital bed. The doctor explained that she suffered from a stroke and she's brain dead. They haven't administered any sleeping medicine, and she's not waking up. My aunt had a tube down her throat, and her lips were swollen and black with some dried blood on them. Before they removed the tube, the elders asked my aunt's husband, my uncle, if he had brought the traditional funeral clothes, and he said he hadn't. Then my uncle came and told me to take his daughter, May, and go back to their house to get the funeral clothes from the closet. For those unfamiliar, the Mong usually dress up their loved ones in traditional funeral clothes before they pass away. Since it was May's mother, I told her not to go back with me. She needed to stay with her mother. I grabbed my cousin Tracy to go with me. My uncle had already given me the keys to their house, so once we got there, I was able to open the door, and we both went inside. Not knowing which room was my uncle and auntie's, I told Tracy to look in the room closer to the living room, and I would go to the other one in the middle of the hallway. I went alone and turned on the lights. When I flicked the switch, the light flickered a little bit. I opened the closet in that room, and in the dark corner to my right, saw a lady in traditional funeral Mong clothes sitting there with swollen, black lips. I pretended not to see her, quickly searched for the clothes on the left, closed the closet, and left the room. I went into the room where Tracy was and told her, "Let's go." I grabbed her hand, and I could tell she wanted to ask where the clothes were, but I kept pulling her until we were outside and I locked the door. In the car, I was about to cry. I told Tracy that I saw something in the other room and suggested we tell them when we get back to the hospital that we couldn't find the clothes. Upon our return, everyone was crying. My aunt had already passed away, and I was so scared. They had already dressed her up, though. My mother told me that the other day, the doctor had said my aunt wasn't going to wake up, so my grandparents had already packed the traditional clothes and placed them in the closet of that hospital room. I was scared and insisted that my mother drive us home, where I eventually shared what had happened. After hearing my story, my mother advised me not to attend my aunt's funeral. She suggested I help prepare a little during the daytime, but to come home once they bring in the body. I didn't go at all during the funeral. I was too scared. Story number 3, The Pale Kid Behind the Sofa. When my family and I first arrived in the US from Thailand, we went to live with my uncle and his family in Green Bay, Wisconsin. They resided in a house with a nice basement. Before our arrival, my uncle and his family had already purchased a bed for my parents, along with some carpet, blankets, and pillows. They set up their basement very nicely. I've never seen a house that nice before. While living with my uncle, his son Paul and I became best friends because we were both 6 years old. We often played together with his toys. Sometimes at night, we would play and watch TV until 11 p.m. It was during the summer with no school, so his parents didn't mind. Plus, my father and uncle loved to stay up and talk. One night, I remember we stayed until 12 a.m. playing. Paul and I went to bed when our fathers went to bed. I woke up around 6 a.m. because I heard someone running around in the living room. Since we slept in the basement, I heard the sound as if someone was running and playing. I assumed it was Paul. I woke up full of energy, ready to go play with Paul and his toys. I climbed the stairs to the living room and saw a little kid jumping on the sofa, then quickly getting down and going behind it. I whispered, "Paul, how come you didn't turn on the light?" I turned on the light and went behind the sofa, where I saw a little kid who looked like Paul, but his face was slimmer and paler. He was just sitting there looking up at me, but he wasn't smiling. As a child, I somehow knew that this wasn't Paul. I got scared, cried, and started running back downstairs to the basement. My mother woke up and asked me what happened. I told her I saw a little boy who looked like Paul in their living room. My father, in his sleepy voice, reassured me, "It's okay, there's nothing, and why are you up so early? Go back to sleep." After that, I went back to lie down with my siblings, but I couldn't sleep anymore. At 8 a.m., when I heard my uncle and his family in the living room, I went back up there. By that time, I wasn't scared anymore for some reason. As I got older, I found out that Paul had an older brother who was born before him but got really sick and died at the hospital when he was 4 years old. I guess what I saw was Paul's brother. That house wasn't haunted, though. I just happened to wake up early and saw what I saw. I wonder why some spirits never move on and continue to stay with their family long after they've died. Story number 4, The Scary Grandma by the Window. We used to live in an area with a large Mong community. Unfortunately, with a significant Hmong population, gossip tended to circulate quite a bit. My grandmother was someone who enjoyed gossiping. Even my father had lectured her several times, urging her not to spread false information or exaggerate other people's gossip. I distinctly recall an incident involving another grandma we referred to as Grandma Kia. She was blind in her left eye. Grandma Kia spread rumors about my grandmother, which angered her. In retaliation, my grandmother propagated a rumor about Grandma Kia having uterine prolapse, claiming that during a strawberry picking outing, Grandma Kia's uterus had fallen to the ground. The tension between the two escalated to the point where my grandmother began cursing Grandma Kia, saying things like, "If I were in your position with my uterus like that, I wouldn't want to live. Why are you still alive? Why don't you just die so I won't have to see you?" I was present during their argument, pleading with my grandmother to stop as they exchanged heated words and pointed fingers. Grandma Kia responded, "Fine. If you don't want to see me and want me to die, I'll come back to haunt you. Even if you don't want to see me, you'll see me." Realizing that living in such an environment filled with constant gossip was not healthy, my parents decided to find a new house and move our family away from that area. 3 months after the disputes between my grandmother and Grandma Kia. 4 years later, my grandmother fell ill, experiencing bleeding between her legs. My parents kept the details hidden from us initially. She seemed fine outwardly, not showing signs of sickness. It wasn't until she ended up in the hospital, and I had to translate for her and my parents, that I discovered she had a cancerous mass in her uterus that needed removal. Despite the doctor's recommendation, my grandmother refused the surgery, opting to return home and seek Mong herbs instead. She found some herbs through relatives, preparing them into tea. She diligently drank the tea multiple times a day, hoping for a cure. One night, returning home late from clubbing with my boyfriend, I felt nauseous. After vomiting and taking a quick shower, I heard whispering in the living room. Investigating, I saw someone by the window drinking something. Assuming it was my grandma, I asked about her pain medicine. It was then that I noticed her white, blind left eye. It wasn't my grandma, but Grandma Kia. Shocked, I retreated to my room. The next day, I informed my parents, who revealed that Grandma Kia had passed away 2 years prior. A month later, my grandmother's bleeding persisted. Further examination showed that the cancer had spread to her kidneys and other areas. A week after that diagnosis, my grandmother succumbed to cancer in the hospital. Story number 5. Grandpa's last visit. Oh. My name is David, and I have a sister named Nali. Nali is a special child, and among all of us, our grandpa loves her the most. He would always take her to school or wait for her every day at the bus stop, doing everything for Nali. Outside our backyard gate was an area with banana trees and tall green bamboos. Many shamans had already warned us that a spirit had been living in that area for a long time. Perhaps there's a portal in that area where banana trees and bamboos are, a portal that connects the dead to the living. My grandpa loved raising pigeons, so he always kept our backyard and front yard clean. One day, he went outside to sweep the area as he usually did. While sweeping close to the banana tree and the bamboos, he suddenly experienced a severe headache. He came back into the house to lie down. While sleeping on the couch, Grandpa started foaming at the mouth. We woke him up, and he told us that he didn't know why, but his head was hurting very badly. We took him to the hospital, and he stayed there for 2 weeks before returning home. During his hospital stay, my aunt consulted a shaman to see why my grandpa suddenly gotten sick. The shaman informed my aunt that my father and uncle wanted to take Grandpa. All the aunties burned incense and pleaded with my father and uncle not to take Grandpa, because there were no men left in the family. By the way, my grandparents only had 2 sons, and both had passed away. In 2015, my grandpa suddenly experienced a severe headache again. He was taken to the hospital by ambulance, and when we went to see him, the doctor said a blood vessel inside his head had ruptured. He was in a lot of pain, so the doctor gave him pain and sedative medicine, putting him in a coma. They connected him to a ventilator for a few days. When my grandpa was still alive, he mentioned that he did not want to be put on a machine to keep him alive. After a few days, our family decided to withdraw care. On that day, all the relatives were at the hospital, and only 2 family members were allowed to see Grandpa at a time. The plan was that once everyone had seen him, the doctor and nurses would remove the tube from his mouth. The doctor warned us that Grandpa might die right away once they took his breathing tube out. I remember going in with my cousin Lang. Grandpa was looking at me, and it seemed like he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. It was close to my high school graduation, and he had told me that he couldn't wait to see me get my diploma. But now I know that he can't, and maybe because of that, he seemed like he wanted to say something to me but couldn't. Once everyone had gone in to see Grandpa, the nurse, respiratory therapist, and the doctor removed the tube from his mouth. He struggled to breathe but was still alive. After struggling for a while, he got tired and closed his eyes. It was as if he was still waiting for someone. The elders present suggested that maybe he was waiting to see my sister Nali. He loved Nali the most, and perhaps he was just waiting to see her. According to the doctor, he was supposed to die right away once the tube was removed, but for some reason, he didn't. We asked the nurse to allow Nali to come in and see Grandpa, but the nurse said Nali was just a child and could not come in. Once we told Grandpa that Nali could not come in to see him because she is still a child, my grandpa took his last breath. Grandpa was wearing a red string on his left wrist when he died. That night, all the relatives and family members came back to our house to plan for the funeral. Some of us were in the backyard when suddenly a white pigeon flew around our house 2 times and landed on one of our orange trees. It was already late at night, and usually pigeons don't fly around at night. But for some reason, a white pigeon landed on our orange tree and looked at us. Some nearby elders said, "This is your grandpa. He's just here to see you guys one last time before he goes." The relatives wanted all the grandchildren to come out and see the pigeon. All of us went out to see the pigeon except Nellie. Nolly is a special child, and she doesn't understand. All she knew is that Grandpa went to the hospital, and Grandpa will come back home like usual. But she didn't know that Grandpa had already passed. The pigeon was on the tree branch looking at us. The elder said, "Where is Nolly? Go get Nolly." I went inside to get Nolly. Once I got Nolly outside to see the pigeon, this time the pigeon flew down onto the ground and wasn't afraid of people. Everyone took their cell phones out and started taking pictures of the pigeon. For some strange reason, the pigeon had a tiny red string on its left ankle. After the pigeon saw Nayli, it took off flying into the dark. It might have been a coincidence, but I honestly believe that the pigeon might have been Grandpa who came to see Nayli because Nayli wasn't able to see him before he passed. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.